Hi everyone, my name is Rudrank Riyam, and it is a little awkward to present remotely in a in-person event, but I'm very excited for it. My talk is about misery of manual bills and how to solve it. And the talk will be about how I used to do manual builds repeatedly as a naive intern, and I realized the amount of time that I was wasting, and how I started writing unit and UI tests, moved to a CI/CD platform for my apps, and in the end automated from end to end for my own apps and released it to the App Store. A brief introduction about myself. I recently graduated last year from college, and in those 4 years, I interned at various startups and at Apple, working on voice control. I previously worked with a lot of startups as an iOS engineer, and I loved writing technical articles, so I wrote many for startups as well. Currently, I am the developer relations engineer at CodeMagic, which is a mobile CI/CD platform, and I'm advocating and helping the iOS community out there. So let's recap to 2020. I was working as an intern in a product startup, and I took the responsibility of their watch application. I was facing an issue on the music player where it was loading very slowly. And if you have worked with WatchOS development, you know how hard it is to have the build on your real device. So we decided to have the builds on a test flight for me and my team to test it on. So in this process, I repeatedly sent manual builds, and at that time we were using Xcode 12, so we didn't have an option to automate the build numbers. So I was for 10 targets, I used to go in each of the targets and increment the build number as well. So I used to then archive the app, wait for it to archive, then click validate, distribute the app, then wait for the post processing to happen. Then after post processing, I used to go on App Store Connect and then add the release notes there. And I think it was like 7 or 8 builds in a day, but it was a disappointing result in the end. So over the internship, I wasn't aware of any tool like Fastlane or CI/CD services, and because I assumed that for this is a very complex process to automate the whole thing, and you require a specific DevOps person who will handle all these things. So in 2021, I realized that there should be a process that I should have for my own apps as well, because I hate this part of development, and this was the least part where where I have to create the screenshots manually for all the devices and then going to App Store to do the add the release notes as well. So I started writing UI and unit tests for my applications because of one incident that is for another day. And then in the process, I love writing technical articles. So I reached out to Semaphore and CodeMagic to write for them on unit and testing, UI testing, and asynchronous testing. And I learned more about mobile CI/CD and how it can help you automate everything. So if I have to give you an example of how my daily routine used to look like as an intern, so I used to go to let's have my application here. I used to go and increment the build number, then go and change the device to any iOS device, then try to archive it, and then it will start archiving. It is a very small project, but for that startup, it used to take like 5 minutes to archive. Then I go and validate the app while it is analyzing signatures, checking for App Store Connect access. As a person who gets distracted very easily, I used to just open Twitter. And then I think you may be aware of this very famous account that we have called iOS memes that people used to check while Xcode is indexing. But for me, it is more of while it is archiving. And so while it is archiving, let's look at an example meme. So what do you have against storyboards? I'm glad you asked. And the person sends a 2-hour voice note. And as a person who has been doing programmatic UI since the very beginning, it is relatable. So I'm not going to do the whole process of archiving. It's just an example to show the time I used to waste context switching and getting distracted in between. So I realize I need a process where I'm automating the archive and trying to create the screenshots automatically as well. And in the meanwhile, so in July, I started working on an app called Quoting, which shows a list of quotes. And this was just an experiment to start with the async await syntax. And for this app, I wanted to make sure that I have everything from automated, from archiving the app to creating the screenshots manually. And in December, CodeMagic was adding an improvement to submit to App Store. And as a dev person, it was the perfect opportunity to feed the feature into my own app so I can understand the whole process and then write an article about it. So I started making sure that I have a workflow configuration in file. And in December, I launched this app, which was a whole automated process, and I'm very proud of that. So the second part of my talk is that the lessons learned is that you can use Fastlane automation tool on your local machine, or if you want to have all this process on a remote server machine, you can have a CI/CD service in place. Then you can configure to build and test and archive the project, because as your project grows, the need for this grows as well. And then you can automate the process for test flight, where you have different beta groups that you can mention where you want to send those that build to, and then release to App Store with a scheduled time or do it manually. And if you have basic screenshots, you can just automate that as well using Fastlane snapshot action, and you can just add a frame to it automatically. So the next part of my talk is regarding how you can actually do it yourself. So let's take an example of the workflow configuration file I had for my application. It is a CodeMagic YAML file, but all the concepts that I'm going to discuss applies to other CI/CD services as well. So usually the providers have a format called YAML for describing everything for all the commands there. So let's say I have a quoting release workflow that consists of all the project, the scheme, and the App Store ID. Do notice that I have this triggering event. So when I have a new release, I go to GitHub, plan a new release, and then it has a webhook that allows me to post a request for each whenever I add a new tag, and it automatically starts the workflow. So though I don't have to go to the site and do that. And code signing, it's a nightmare. And if you are doing automatic code signing, it's a lot easier if you're an individual developer compared to working as a team. So you add the scripts for initializing keychain, then fetch all the signing files for your particular project and of the type App Store Connect distribution. Then you add the certificates to keychain and make Xcode use that profile. And this automatic versioning thing that I used to do manually for all the 10 targets, all you have to do is just say that increment the number by 1 for all the targets. And you shouldn't do that on your own. And the next part is running tests for your application. You can specify the project, the scheme, and the device where you want to test your app. And the next part is on distribution, the archiving the IPA to send to App Store Connect. You can just specify the project name and the scheme. If you want to also automate the screenshot part, you can use the support of Fastlane to just execute Fastlane snapshot. It gives you a file called an HTML file that contains all the screenshots. Here's an example of it. So this is the screenshot that I use in my apps. It's very basic. I just write a few UI tests for this to take all the screenshot for all the devices I want. And you can, if you have an app that consists of a lot of languages, you can also do it for other languages as well. This saves you a lot of time when you're working on this. And the next part is about publishing to App Store. You provide the App Store credentials that you can get from, just give me a second. You can get it from apps users and access. You have to do it if you are using a tool like Fastlane or your CI/CD server, where you are providing a key ID, an issuer ID, and the private API key. And you can have the release type as manual, automatic, or scheduled. I preferred to have a scheduled release so I can do all the marketing stuff around that particular date. And assuming that my app is accepted on the App Store. And for the last part, I usually don't like to go to the website and check what's the build status. So you can add notify yourself on email or Slack for the success build or a failure build and get the feedback on what went wrong. So in hindsight, this is the whole workflow configuration, a simple configuration that helps you test the app, archive the app, takes automatic screenshots and publish it to the App Store. So when this is me that changes the code on GitHub, it automatically starts the workflow on CodeMagic. If there's a error, it sends feedback to me, and if it's a good success, then it ships the app directly to App Store. So this is how I'm going to start. This is where I start the build, and it shows all this process happens on a remote machine. So I can go grab a coffee while this is happening, or I can go and work on the marketing material. I don't have to go and look at the website or do anything on that part. When the App Store distribution part is done, the post-processing happens for the App Store distribution, and I don't have to intervene. There's no human intervention where you have to go and manually click and send it to test flight. So it automatically creates a new App Store submission on App Store Connect. So let's say I'm back from my coffee break and all I see is that it is waiting for review with the release note that I added for this version. And if you see, my first version actually contained the release note as this version contains bugs and improvements, but that's how it is. So in conclusion, when you are listening to this for the first time or this concept, it is very complicated. It sounds complicated and complex, but as you progress and write this all steps on your own, then it gets very simple. And now that I have one app which has the end-to-end automation process pipeline created, it is very easy for me to automate all my other apps as well, because all I have to do is take that workflow configuration file and add it for all the apps. And right now what I have done is created a monorepo which has all my apps, and when there's a change set in one of the particular folders, then it triggers the build for that particular app. So it's just one whole configuration file. And with that, I conclude my talk, and you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter, and I open source my libraries and frameworks on GitHub at Rudrank Riyam. And I also write about iOS development and Swift UI on my blog, rudrank.blog.